All right. I think the next question is from Martha Shanahan to Mr. Taraya.
Do you agree with Judge Thomas McCousher's assessment that Connecticut's school funding system is preventing the state's children from getting an adequate education? And do you think that the legislature should act now to try to make reforms based on his decision, or wait to see the outcome of an appeal?
No, so for the legislative to get involved right now, from my understanding, it's still within the judicial side. So it's be inappropriate to step in and start regulating or legislating against something that hasn't even been decided yet on the Supreme level. So, but as far as his ruling and going with it, it's like, yes, it needs to be, the education funding needs to be reformed, just like everything else needs to be reformed in here. And it's unfortunate that education had to be the front line or the headline of this movement, because it's our children who are having to feel the pain or to feel the sacrifice. So I'd like to see what we can do and take a top-down approach and see what the education can do to be more effective. But yeah, Judge McCoskey's ruling to listen to the briefs and listen to the oral arguments makes sense. And perhaps perhaps it's not my call or judgment. Maybe he overreached with his ruling, but then that's why we have different levels of court systems.
Representative Ryan, should the legislature begin working on things like fixing and making more equitable the way the education is funded and many of the issues raised by the judge, or since it's now an appeal to the Supreme Court, the better idea, let's wait and see what kind of final ruling we get?
Well, I think we're hesitant to make any kind of decisions. I mean, until we get a final ruling. But I've got to say that there's been a process legislatively for years that have given us the educational system we've gotten. So, I mean, dealing with funding, dealing with teacher evaluations, dealing with special ed children. It's gone through a committee process. We've heard what people have had to say. When I say the committee process, anything from hearings to the committee actually discussing some of the things that have been enacted. So I think people think that we've done the best we can, but it's something we continually work on. The educational system, what we can do to make it better. We do have an education inequity in this state that we're trying to address now, a gap of education that people are trying to work on now between some of the municipalities. The funding is always an issue. And that's why the ECS formula came about, to make it equitable funding across the state. So, I mean, I think that might be, we look at that every time we do a budget. We look at the funding formula and how it works well for us and where does it work for the communities. So I think that's always been an ongoing process. So I think we will be working on it.
Judge McCousher drew the conclusion that there really is no longer any objective formula for how education is funded at the local level, and so the fallback is a lot of politics. It's who can play the best politics, making sure they get funding, and he contended he saw poorer towns being stripped of money while there was increases of towns that are already well off and sufficiently funded. I mean, was he at all correct at some of the root causes? Is it broken? Does it need to be fixed?
Well, I think it's not unusual for the towns that don't get as much money they want to think it's broken, and for the towns that get as much money as they want to think it works very well. So I think it's just something we can definitely look at to see if. I heard those accusations, for lack of a better word, that maybe that's something we have to go back and look on to see if there was that lack of fairness. I wasn't aware of it. I know, the city of Norwich gets, via its variety of grants, gets money, and I don't know if that's what he was speaking to, that some of the large municipalities get like alliance grants into, what's the other, commissioners grants, programs, so they get some more money because they're dealing with more different school population than some of the rural communities, suburban communities do. So we kind of help them with those programs that they do to improve the school performance of those children. So I don't know if that's what he was speaking about when he said that some communities get more money in that regard, because we've been pretty good about providing towns as much as we can within our means. I mean, education, I believe, is the number one thing in the school. It's the largest part of the state budget, if not one or two. So it's something we always look at very carefully, because that has a big impact on our budget.
And last word on this, Mr. Taraya. I mean, another thing he pointed out was the fact that the state funds school building projects sort of without any rationale beyond, if you're building a school, it meets the criteria, you get the money. there's no questioning attitude. Do we need that school? Would there be a better, more efficient approach? Have you looked at that issue at all about the expenditures that go from the state to the schools for new projects, whether they're properly vetted?
I've taken a look through, like for throughout the state, some of the schools are closing because there's just not enough attendance. I know there was one school, the name slips my mind, one school in our state that actually, like 2 days or the weekend before classes were supposed to open, they sent a notice and saying, like, oh, apologize, you have to go and find yourself, another school, to the parents, which was, was very, not the most convenient way to go about it. But it's you have to look at it for how to fund. And I know a lot of schools take a look at, okay, what's our enrollment? How many people? Look at the demographics. Like, do we need to start opening new schools when there are still facilities that we can utilize? Oh, like, let's keep these schools. Don't put me in office, or this is what we're gonna like. Let's not close these schools. So it's we just need to take a look at current enrollments. I know performance. That's the biggest thing. To me, it doesn't make sense for the better performing schools to get higher funding. It's almost reversed. It's great that the incentive is there to say, like, oh, this is a great school, teachers are doing an effective job, but we also have to look at how come the other schools are not testing well and what we can do to get them on the same level.
And kind of last word on that, Representative Ryan, the judge pointed out, he pointed out $2 billion is spent towards programming. The state contributes $1 billion. It's spending on paying off loans and debts for new school construction, and he wondered if the state is being discerning enough in approving school projects. Is that something you think this legislature should look at?
Actually, I was at one point chairman of the subcommittee on school construction, and they do go through an entire process before we look at it. And also the community, before it even comes to us, makes a decision because they have to make an investment out of their own money, their own taxpayers' money. And so they're usually pretty discerning and pretty careful about what they propose as to whether their community can afford it, even their share of it, even though the state might give them anywhere from 50 to 80% of the cost of the school, depending upon their what level of school they fall into and that criteria. So that's where the initial decision is made at the local level. Then it comes to the state. The school building construction division of the Department of Education goes over it very carefully to see what they need, whether they need a building as large as they claim they need. And I've seen some issues where they've gone back to schools and just said, you're asking for a lot more than we think you really need. You might want to review these plans and redo them to make it fit your needs better as we see it. And so you see that happening quite a bit before it finally comes to us to accept. I think generally by the time it gets to us, all these kind of things are taken care of, so that it's usually accepted. So there's that whole process that it goes through to make sure that the building fits the needs of the community and isn't overbuilt, and at the same time, in some cases you might find them maybe even a little underbuilt because of the cost factors that are usually determined on the local level.
All right, thank you.